6-year-old Amelia Rodriguez sat hunched over her small desk, tears streaming down her brown cheeks as she stared at the red F marked across her math test. The mansion's study room felt enormous around her tiny frame, with its high ceilings and expensive furniture that seemed to mock her failure. Her father's voice echoed from the hallway, sharp and disappointed as he spoke to someone on his phone about what to do with a child who cannot even pass first grade. The little girl's hands trembled as she gathered the crumpled test papers, each one bearing the same shameful grade. Reading, math, spelling, all failures. Her father, billionaire businessman Ricardo Rodriguez, had already threatened to send her to the strictest boarding school he could find if her grades didn't improve by the end of the month. That deadline was only 2 weeks away. Have you ever felt completely alone even when surrounded by luxury? What happens when a child's only hope comes from the most unexpected source? Subscribe and share your thoughts about childhood struggles in the comments below. From the doorway, Grace Washington watched quietly. The 34-year-old African-American woman had worked as the Rodriguez family's head housekeeper for 3 years, cleaning their sprawling Beverly Hills mansion with careful attention to every detail. She wore her standard navy uniform, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, but her warm brown eyes held deep concern as she observed the struggling child. Grace had noticed Amelia's difficulties for months now. While Mr. Rodriguez traveled for business deals and attended important meetings, his daughter spent most afternoons alone with her homework, growing more frustrated and sad with each passing day. The expensive private tutors her father hired seemed to make things worse, speaking to Amelia with impatience and using complicated methods that only confused her further. "Another bad grade, sweet pea?" Grace asked softly, stepping into the study room. Amelia looked up with red-rimmed eyes and nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She held up the math test, showing the rows of addition problems she'd gotten wrong. The numbers seemed to dance and blur together whenever she tried to focus on them, making her head hurt and her stomach feel sick. Grace knelt down beside the child's chair, her voice gentle and understanding. "You know what? I bet you're trying real hard, aren't you?" "Papa says I'm not smart enough," Amelia whispered, her small voice breaking. "He says smart children don't fail every single test. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should just go to boarding school where they know how to fix stupid kids." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She had her own daughter back in her modest apartment across town, 8-year-old Destiny, who struggled with similar challenges. Grace knew exactly how crushing it felt to watch a child lose confidence in themselves, especially when the adults around them focused on failures instead of potential. "Honey, let me tell you something important," Grace said, sitting cross-legged on the expensive carpet so she could look directly into Amelia's eyes. "You are not stupid. Not even close. Sometimes our brains just work differently and we need different ways to learn. That doesn't make us less smart, it makes us special." Amelia blinked at her, surprised by the kindness in Grace's voice. None of the tutors or teachers had ever spoken to her this way. They usually sighed heavily and talked about her learning deficits, or attention problems, as if she wasn't sitting right there listening to every hurtful word. "But I can't do anything right," Amelia protested, gesturing at the pile of failed tests. "Even simple stuff like counting to 20 or reading easy words. The tutors get mad and Papa gets disappointed and I just want to hide in my room forever." Grace gently took the math test from Amelia's small hands, studying the problems with careful attention. She could see exactly where the confusion was happening. The worksheet was formatted in a way that would challenge any 6-year-old, with tiny numbers and complex instructions that would overwhelm a child who was already struggling with confidence. "You know what I see when I look at this?" Grace asked, pointing to one of Amelia's attempts at addition. "I see a little girl who was trying her absolute best. Look here, you got the first part right, and here too. You understand more than you think you do." For the first time in weeks, Amelia felt a tiny spark of hope. Grace's words were different from everything else she'd heard. Instead of focusing on the red marks and failures, Grace was pointing out the parts she'd done correctly. It felt strange but wonderful to have someone notice her efforts instead of just her mistakes. "The problem isn't that you can't learn," Grace continued, gathering up the scattered papers and organizing them into a neat pile. "The problem is that nobody's been teaching you in a way that makes sense to your particular kind of smart. Every child learns differently, and that's perfectly okay." Amelia wiped her nose on her sleeve and looked at Grace with growing curiosity. "Really? You think I might be able to get better grades?" "I don't just think it, sweetie. I know it. But it's going to take patience and the right kind of help. Someone who believes in you and wants to see you succeed, not someone who gets frustrated when you need extra time or different explanations." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made both of them look toward the door. Mr. Rodriguez appeared, his expensive suit perfectly pressed and his expression stern as he took in the scene. His dark hair was slicked back, and his cold brown eyes immediately focused on the test papers in Grace's hands. "What's going on here?" he asked in his sharp voice. "Grace, I don't pay you to interfere with Amelia's education. She needs to learn discipline, not coddling." Grace stood up slowly, maintaining her respectful demeanor while keeping herself positioned protectively near Amelia's chair. "I was just helping clean up her study materials, Mr. Rodriguez." The child was feeling a bit overwhelmed. "She's overwhelmed because she's not applying herself properly," he replied curtly. "The boarding school I've been researching has an excellent reputation for dealing with children who have academic difficulties. Perhaps a more structured environment would benefit her." Amelia's face crumpled at the mention of boarding school again. Grace felt her heart break watching the little girl's shoulders slump with defeat. She made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Rodriguez, if I may," Grace said carefully, "sometimes children just need a different approach to learning. Maybe before considering such a big change, we could try some alternative study methods here at home." "Grace, I appreciate your concern, but you're the housekeeper, not an educator," Mr. Rodriguez said dismissively. "I've hired the best tutors money can buy, and none of them have been able to help her. What makes you think you could do any better?" The question hung in the air between them. Grace knew she was stepping outside her role as an employee, but watching Amelia's pain was unbearable. She thought of her own daughter and all the children she'd once taught before circumstances forced her to take cleaning jobs to make ends meet. "Because I care about her success more than my reputation," Grace answered quietly. "Because I see potential where others see problems. And because sometimes the most important thing a child needs is someone who truly believes in them." Mr. Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment, clearly surprised by her boldness. Amelia looked back and forth between them, holding her breath as she waited to see what would happen next. "You have 2 weeks," he said finally. "If her grades don't improve significantly by then, she goes to boarding school. And Grace, if you're going to involve yourself in this situation, her success or failure will reflect on your position here as well." With that warning, he turned and walked away, leaving Grace and Amelia alone in the study room. The little girl looked up at Grace with wide eyes, amazed that someone had been willing to take such a risk for her. "You didn't have to do that," Amelia whispered. "Papa might fire you if I don't get better." Grace smiled and gently touched Amelia's cheek, brushing away the last of her tears. "Sweet pea, some things are worth the risk. You're worth the risk. Now how about we start fresh tomorrow? I've got some ideas that might make learning a whole lot more fun." As Grace tucked the failed tests into a folder, she felt a mixture of determination and nervousness. She'd just committed to something that could cost her job, but looking at Amelia's hopeful expression, she knew she'd made the right choice. Every child deserved someone willing to fight for their potential. That night, after finishing her regular duties, Grace sat in her small apartment researching teaching methods and planning lessons. She thought about her own struggles as a single mother working multiple jobs to support Destiny, and how different her life might be if someone had taken a chance on her dreams years ago. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new approach, one built on patience, creativity, and unwavering belief in a little girl's ability to succeed. Grace fell asleep at her kitchen table, surrounded by notes and ideas, ready to prove that with the right support, any child could shine. The next morning, Grace arrived at the Rodriguez mansion earlier than usual, her mind buzzing with plans for helping Amelia. She'd spent most of the night researching different learning techniques and remembering her own teaching methods from years past. Her small purse contained colorful markers, stickers, and simple manipulatives she'd purchased with her own limited funds. Amelia sat at the breakfast table, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate without eating. Her father read his newspaper while drinking coffee, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. The little girl kept glancing toward the study room with obvious dread, knowing another day of struggling with incomprehensible worksheets awaited her. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez, Amelia," Grace said warmly as she began clearing the dishes. She noticed Amelia's untouched breakfast and the anxious expression on the child's face. "Morning, Grace," Mr. Rodriguez replied without looking up from his paper. "I'll be at the office until late tonight. Make sure Amelia spends adequate time on her studies. The tutor will be here at 2 o'clock. After he left for work, Grace found Amelia still sitting at the table, her small shoulders tense with worry. The child looked up when Grace approached, her brown eyes reflecting the fear that had become her constant companion when it came to anything academic. "I don't want to do schoolwork today," Amelia said quietly. "I already know I'll just fail again. Maybe Papa is right about boarding school. Maybe I really am too dumb to learn." Grace pulled out a chair and sat down beside Amelia, her voice gentle but firm. Now hold on there, sweet pea. Yesterday I made you a promise and I intend to keep it. But I need you to trust me and give this a real try. Can you do that? Amelia studied Grace's face, seeing something she'd never encountered before. Genuine confidence in her abilities. All the adults in her life had looked at her with disappointment or frustration, but Grace's expression held only warmth and certainty. What do you want me to do? Amelia asked hesitantly. First, let's forget about those worksheets for now. I want to understand how your mind works, what makes sense to you, and what kinds of things you enjoy. Learning should feel good, not scary. Grace led Amelia to the living room instead of the intimidating study room. She spread a soft blanket on the floor and pulled out her bag of supplies. Amelia's eyes widened with curiosity as she saw the bright colors and interesting materials. Are those for me? Amelia asked, reaching toward a set of rainbow-colored counting blocks. They absolutely are. Now tell me about your favorite things. What do you like to do when you're not worrying about school? For the first time in weeks, Amelia's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. I love drawing pictures and I like to help Maria in the kitchen sometimes. Oh, and I really like stories, especially ones about princesses who go on adventures. Grace smiled, mentally noting each interest as a potential pathway for learning. Those are wonderful things to enjoy. Did you know that drawing uses the same kind of thinking as math? And cooking is full of reading and measuring and following directions. Really? Amelia asked, her voice filled with surprise. Really, truly. Now let's start with something fun. Can you show me how you count to 10 using these pretty blocks? As Amelia began arranging the colorful blocks, Grace observed carefully. She noticed that the child counted accurately but lost focus when the numbers were written on paper. Amelia's hands moved confidently with the physical objects, but her confidence disappeared when faced with abstract symbols on worksheets. Look at that, Grace said encouragingly. You know your numbers perfectly. The problem isn't that you can't count. The problem is that those boring worksheets don't let you show what you already know. They spent the next hour exploring different ways to work with numbers. Grace had Amelia count toys, arrange snacks by size, and even dance to songs with numbers in the lyrics. With each activity, Amelia's confidence grew visibly. This is actually kind of fun, Amelia admitted, carefully sorting colored candies into groups. It doesn't feel like real school. But it is real school, Grace explained. Just school that makes sense for how your brain likes to learn. Some children learn best by sitting still and reading books. Others, like you, learn best by moving around and touching things and making connections to stuff they already care about. When the expensive tutor arrived that afternoon, Grace watched from the kitchen doorway as the woman immediately pulled out thick workbooks and began lecturing Amelia about proper pencil grip and sitting posture. Within minutes, Amelia's shoulders had tensed up again, and her face showed the familiar signs of overwhelm and confusion. I don't understand, Amelia said when the tutor asked her to complete a page of subtraction problems. It's quite simple really, the tutor replied with obvious impatience. Just borrow from the tens place and regroup. Any second grader should be able to grasp this concept. Grace watched as Amelia's confidence crumbled once again. The child who had been successfully working with numbers just hours earlier now looked defeated and lost. After the tutor left with another disappointing report, Grace found Amelia crying in her bedroom. I thought maybe I was getting smarter, Amelia sobbed. But I'm still too stupid to understand what she was teaching me. Grace sat on the edge of Amelia's bed and gently rubbed the child's back. Sweetie, you are absolutely getting smarter. The problem isn't with you. The problem is that lady doesn't know how to teach you in your special way of learning. But Papa paid her lots of money to teach me. She must know the right way. Money doesn't always buy the right kind of help, Grace said thoughtfully. Sometimes the best help comes from people who understand what you're going through because they've been there too. Amelia looked up with tear-stained cheeks. You mean you had trouble in school too? Grace nodded, choosing her words carefully. I struggled a lot when I was young. Reading was especially hard for me. But I had a teacher who believed I could learn just like I believe in you. She taught me that being different isn't the same as being less than. What happened to her? Your teacher? She changed my whole life by helping me see my own potential. And years later, I became a teacher myself so I could do the same thing for other children. Grace paused, realizing she'd revealed more about her background than she'd intended. You were a teacher? Amelia asked with wide eyes. Like a real teacher in a real school? I taught first and second grade for several years, and I loved helping children discover that learning could be joyful instead of scary. Grace's voice held a note of wistfulness as she remembered those days. Then why are you cleaning our house instead of teaching kids? The question was innocent but piercing. Grace looked at this bright, curious child and made another decision that would change both their lives. Because sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan, and we have to make hard choices to take care of our families. But maybe, just maybe, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. Maybe I'm here to help you. Amelia sat up straighter, her tears stopping as hope began to replace despair. Do you really think you could teach me better than the fancy tutors? I think I could teach you in a way that honors how special your mind is, instead of trying to force you to learn like everyone else. But it would mean spending lots of time together and working hard even when things get frustrating. I want to try, Amelia said immediately. I want to try with you. Grace felt her heart expand with purpose and determination. Then we'll make it work, sweet pea. We'll show everyone just how brilliant you really are. That evening, when Mr. Rodriguez returned from his business meetings, he found an unusual sight. Amelia was sitting at the kitchen table with Grace, both of them laughing as they worked with what appeared to be a board game covered in numbers. What's going on here? He asked, his tone suspicious. Grace is teaching me a new way to do math, Amelia said excitedly. Look, Papa. I can add numbers up to 20 now, and I didn't even need to use the worksheets. Mr. Rodriguez frowned as he looked at the colorful game board and the scattered manipulatives. This doesn't look like serious academic work, Amelia. Where are your proper study materials? But I am studying, Amelia protested. Grace showed me that math is everywhere. We counted the ingredients when we made cookies and we measured how tall I am, and we even did patterns with the flowers in the garden. Mr. Rodriguez, Grace said respectfully, I know this looks unconventional, but Amelia has been learning all day. She's just been learning through methods that make sense to her particular learning style. He stared at them both for a long moment, clearly skeptical of this non-traditional approach. The tutor said she showed no improvement today. Grace and Amelia exchanged a look. The tutor was using methods that don't work for Amelia's type of intelligence, Grace explained carefully. With respect, sir, there are many different ways to be smart and many different ways to learn. I want to keep learning with Grace, Amelia said boldly, looking directly at her father. She makes everything make sense and she doesn't get angry when I need to ask questions. Mr. Rodriguez looked between his daughter's hopeful face and Grace's steady gaze. He was a man accustomed to quantifiable results and proven methods, but he couldn't deny that Amelia seemed happier and more confident than she'd been in months. You have 12 days left, he said finally. If this unconventional approach doesn't produce measurable results, we proceed with the boarding school plan. And Grace, I expect detailed reports on Amelia's progress. After he left the room, Grace and Amelia smiled at each other. They both understood the challenge ahead, but for the first time, it felt achievable instead of impossible. Are you sure you want to help me? Amelia asked quietly. Papa seemed really serious about the boarding school thing. Grace knelt down and took Amelia's small hands in her own. Sweet pea, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We're going to show everyone what you're capable of and we're going to have fun doing it. As they cleaned up their learning materials together, both of them felt the beginning of something special. A partnership built on mutual respect, genuine care, and unwavering belief in potential that others had overlooked. The third day of their new arrangement began with Amelia actually looking forward to learning time. She bounced into the kitchen where Grace was preparing breakfast, her pajamas wrinkled but her eyes bright with anticipation. What are we going to learn today? Amelia asked, climbing onto her favorite stool beside the counter. Can we do more of that counting game? Or maybe the story problems with the toy animals? Grace smiled while flipping pancakes, delighted by the complete transformation in the child's attitude toward academics. Well, I thought we might work on reading today. But first, let's eat breakfast and talk about something important. As they sat together at the small breakfast nook, Grace pulled out a colorful notebook she'd decorated with stickers and Amelia's name written in bright purple letters. This is your learning journal, Grace explained. Every day we're going to write down what you learned and how you felt about it. That way we can see how much you're growing and your papa can see your progress too. Amelia traced her finger over her name on the cover, amazed that someone had made something so special just for her. It's beautiful. But I'm not very good at writing yet. That's perfectly okay. We'll start small and I'll help you with words you don't know. The important thing is that this journal shows your journey, including all the places where you worked hard to figure something out. They spent the morning working on reading using a method Grace called story building. Instead of struggling through boring textbook pages, Amelia helped create stories about characters she cared about, gradually learning to recognize common words within contexts that made sense to her. Once upon a time there was a little princess named. Grace paused, looking at Amelia expectantly. Bella? Amelia said immediately. Grace wrote the name carefully on a large piece of paper, sounding out each letter. Bella. Can you tell me what sound the first letter makes? But, like in ball and butterfly, Amelia answered confidently. Perfect. Now, where did Princess Bella live? In a big castle with a library full of magic books, Amelia said, her imagination already running wild with possibilities. As they built the story together, Grace wrote down key words and helped Amelia practice reading them in context. Cat, big, red, happy, magic. Each word became part of an adventure instead of an isolated challenge on a worksheet. Look at all these words you can read now, Grace said, pointing to their growing list. And every single one of them is part of a story you helped create. That means your brain will remember them better because they matter to you. By lunchtime, Amelia had successfully read 3 simple sentences on her own, something that would have been impossible just days earlier. She was so excited that she insisted on reading their story to Maria, the family's cook, who praised her efforts enthusiastically. Mija, you sound like a real reader now, Maria said warmly. I'm so proud of how hard you've been working. The validation from another adult who cared about her made Amelia glow with pride. Grace watched the interaction, understanding how important it was for children to feel supported by their entire community, not just one person. After lunch, they moved on to math concepts using what Grace called real-world applications. They measured ingredients for cookies, calculated how many minutes were left until dinner, and even worked on simple addition by counting the flowers they picked from the garden. Math isn't just numbers on paper, Grace explained as they arranged flowers by color and size. It's everywhere around us. When you set the table, you're doing division. When you share toys with friends, you're doing subtraction. When you save allowance money, you're doing addition. I never thought about it that way, Amelia said, carefully counting out equal groups of daisies. Math seems so scary in those workbooks, but this feels like playing. The best learning often feels like playing, Grace agreed. When you're having fun and feeling curious, your brain is wide open to new ideas. When you're scared or bored, your brain shuts down to protect itself. As the afternoon progressed, Grace noticed something wonderful happening. Amelia was beginning to ask questions instead of just accepting confusion. She was starting to trust that it was safe to wonder about things, safe to make mistakes, and safe to take the time she needed to understand concepts fully. Grace, Amelia said during their reading time, what if I don't understand something right away? Will you get frustrated like the tutors do? The question broke Grace's heart because it revealed how much damage had been done to this child's confidence by adults who should have supported her learning journey. Sweet pea, let me tell you something very important. Learning is not a race. It's perfectly normal and okay to need time to understand new things. Some concepts you'll pick up quickly and others will take longer. That doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It just means you're human. Really? Really truly. And if you don't understand something, that means I need to find a better way to explain it. When a child doesn't understand, it's not the child's fault. It's the teacher's job to keep trying different approaches until something clicks. That evening, when Mr. Rodriguez came home, he found a very different scene than usual. Instead of tears and frustration, he discovered Amelia and Grace sitting together on the living room floor, surrounded by books and papers, both of them laughing about something in a story they were reading. Papa, come listen to this, Amelia called out when she saw him. I can read a whole story now. She proceeded to read 6 sentences about Princess Bella's adventure in the magic library, stumbling only twice and self-correcting both mistakes without help. Her father listened with growing amazement as his daughter demonstrated skills she'd never shown before. That was actually quite good, he admitted reluctantly. How many words would you say she can read now, Grace? She's mastered about 30 sight words and she can sound out simple 3- and 4-letter words independently, Grace reported. More importantly, she's beginning to understand that reading is about meaning, not just pronouncing letters correctly. Mr. Rodriguez picked up Amelia's learning journal and flipped through the pages, seeing evidence of genuine progress in math, reading, and even early writing skills. The work looked different from traditional academic materials, but the results were undeniably positive. I'm still skeptical of these methods, he said carefully, but I can't argue with the improvement in her attitude and confidence. Continue what you're doing, but I want to see continued measurable progress. After he left for his home office, Amelia turned to Grace with serious eyes. He seemed a little bit proud, didn't he? He absolutely did. And he should be proud. You're working so hard and learning so much. But more importantly, how do you feel about your progress? Amelia considered the question thoughtfully. I feel like maybe I'm not stupid after all. Like maybe my brain just needed someone who understood how to talk to it properly. Grace felt tears prick her eyes at the wisdom in the child's words. Your brain is beautiful and unique and powerful, Amelia. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. That night, as Grace walked home to her own small apartment, she reflected on the events of the past few days. Working with Amelia was reawakening parts of herself she'd thought were buried forever. The teacher she used to be was coming back to life, and it felt like returning home after a long journey. When she arrived at her apartment, her own daughter Destiny was waiting with homework spread across their tiny kitchen table. At 8 years old, Destiny was facing some of the same challenges that Amelia struggled with, but Grace had learned to apply the same patient, creative approaches to her own child's education. How was work today, Mama? Destiny asked, looking up from a worksheet that was clearly causing frustration. It was wonderful, baby girl. I got to help a little girl discover that she's much smarter than she thought she was. Now, let me see what's giving you trouble and we'll figure it out together. As Grace sat down to help her own daughter, she realized that her work with Amelia was creating positive ripple effects in her own life. She was becoming a better teacher, a more confident mother, and a person who remembered her own worth and capabilities. Back at the Rodriguez mansion, Amelia lay in her bed holding the storybook she and Grace had created together. For the first time in months, she felt excited about tomorrow's lessons instead of dreading them. She was beginning to understand that learning could be an adventure instead of a punishment. The foundation of trust between Grace and Amelia was growing stronger each day, built on patience, respect, and genuine care. Neither of them knew yet how dramatically this relationship would transform both their lives, but they both sensed that something special was beginning to bloom. By the end of the first week, Amelia's transformation was becoming impossible to ignore. She bounded out of bed each morning asking what new adventures they would explore in their learning time. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even the usually reserved Maria had started incorporating educational games into their kitchen activities. Buenos dias, little scholar, Maria greeted Amelia at breakfast. Are you ready to help me count ingredients for today's lunch? Yes. Grace taught me that cooking is really just math and reading disguised as food, Amelia replied proudly, pulling her favorite stool up to the counter. Grace arrived to find Amelia already practicing her sight words using magnetic letters on the refrigerator, an activity she'd started doing on her own because it was fun rather than required. The change in the child's self-directed learning behavior was remarkable. Good morning, my eager student, Grace said warmly. I see you've been practicing your letters. Can you spell your favorite word for me? Castle. Amelia announced, carefully arranging the letters. Castle. It's from our Princess Bella story and I can read it and spell it and everything. The pride in the child's voice was unmistakable. Grace remembered how just a week ago, Amelia had been convinced she was too stupid to learn anything. Now she was volunteering to practice skills and celebrating her own achievements. They spent the morning working on what Grace called confidence building through mastery. Instead of constantly introducing new concepts before old ones were solid, they deepened Amelia's understanding of skills she was developing, allowing her to experience the satisfaction of true competence. Today we're going to become addition experts, Grace announced, pulling out their collection of colorful manipulatives. You already know how to add numbers up to 10. Now we're going to explore what happens when we add bigger numbers, but we'll use all the tools you're already comfortable with. Using everything from toy cars to pieces of fruit, they worked through addition problems that would have seemed impossible to Amelia the previous week. But because they built on her existing knowledge and used methods that made sense to her learning style, the concepts felt natural and achievable. Look, Grace! Amelia exclaimed, successfully solving her first double-digit addition problem using blocks and counting bears. 15 plus 12 equals 27. I did that all by myself. You absolutely did. And do you see how you figured it out? You didn't just memorize a rule. You actually understand what addition means and how numbers work together. The difference between memorization and true understanding was crucial to Grace's teaching philosophy. She wanted Amelia to develop deep comprehension that would serve as a foundation for all future learning, rather than just cramming for tests. During their afternoon reading session, they reached a milestone that brought tears to Grace's eyes. Amelia successfully read an entire page from a beginning chapter book without any help, sounding out unfamiliar words using the phonics strategies they'd been practicing. Wait, did I just read that whole page by myself? Amelia asked, looking stunned by her own achievement. You sure did, sweet pea. Every single word. How does that feel? Like magic, Amelia whispered. Like the words are finally making friends with my brain instead of being all jumbled up and mean. That afternoon, the expensive tutor arrived for her weekly session with a stack of traditional workbooks and her usual expression of barely concealed impatience. Grace watched from the kitchen as the woman immediately began critiquing Amelia's posture and handwriting before even assessing what the child had learned. "Your letters are still quite sloppy," the tutor began. "And I see you haven't completed any of the worksheets I assigned last week. We really must focus on discipline and proper academic habits." "But I have been learning lots of things," Amelia protested gently. "I can read chapter books now and I know edition up to 27, and I wrote 3 whole stories about Princess Bella." "Those creative exercises are fine for playtime," the tutor replied dismissively, "but we need to prepare you for real academic assessment. Now let's begin with this phonics worksheet." Grace watched as Amelia's confident posture gradually deflated under the tutor's criticism. Within minutes, the child who had been celebrating her reading achievement was once again hunched over worksheets, looking confused and defeated. After the tutor left with another negative report, Grace found Amelia sitting quietly in her room, staring out the window with a troubled expression. "Hey there, what's going on in that smart brain of yours?" Grace asked, settling beside her on the window seat. "The tutor lady said my learning doesn't count because it's not the right kind," Amelia said sadly. "She said creative exercises are just playing, not real school. Maybe Papa was right to want to send me away." Grace felt a surge of protective anger toward the tutor, but kept her voice calm and reassuring. "Amelia, look at me. What you've learned this week is absolutely real and absolutely valuable. You can read chapter books. You understand math concepts. You can write complete sentences. Those are facts, no matter what anyone else says about your methods. But what if Papa agrees with her? What if he thinks my progress doesn't count either?" It was a valid concern that Grace had been worrying about herself. Mr. Rodriguez valued traditional metrics and conventional approaches. Would he recognize the genuine educational growth his daughter had achieved through non-traditional methods? "We're going to document everything you've learned so clearly that no one can question your progress," Grace said determinedly. "Tomorrow we'll create a portfolio showing all your achievements. Stories you've written, math problems you've solved, books you can read. Evidence that speaks for itself." That evening, Mr. Rodriguez returned home to find Grace waiting respectfully in the living room with a folder of materials and a carefully prepared progress report. "I'd like to show you Amelia's actual learning outcomes from this week," Grace said, handing him the documentation. "I believe the results speak for themselves." He opened the folder skeptically but found himself increasingly impressed as he reviewed the contents. Sample stories Amelia had written, math worksheets she'd completed successfully, a list of books she could now read independently, and detailed notes about her improved confidence and enthusiasm for learning. "This is substantial progress," he admitted reluctantly. But Mrs. Patterson, the tutor, reported that Amelia showed no improvement during their session today. "With respect, Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Patterson is measuring Amelia against standards that don't account for different learning styles. Your daughter has made remarkable progress when taught through methods that work with her natural abilities rather than against them." Mr. Rodriguez studied the evidence more carefully, particularly impressed by a story Amelia had written and illustrated about a little girl who discovered she was brave enough to face any challenge. "The writing quality here is genuinely impressive for a 6-year-old, he said thoughtfully. "And these math problems are more advanced than what she was attempting just a week ago." "Amelia is exceptionally bright," Grace said firmly. "She just needed someone who understood how to teach to her strengths instead of focusing on her challenges." At that moment, Amelia appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of their conversation. She looked nervously between her father and Grace, unsure whether the discussion would result in good news or bad. "Papa, did Grace show you my stories?" she asked tentatively. "I worked really hard on them." Mr. Rodriguez looked at his daughter with new eyes, seeing the confidence and enthusiasm that had replaced her previous anxiety about academic topics. "She did show me, Amelia. I'm very impressed with how much you've learned this week." Amelia's face lit up with joy at hearing genuine praise from her father for the first time in months. "Really? You think I'm getting smarter?" "I think you were always smart," he said, surprising both Amelia and Grace with his admission. "Perhaps we just needed to find the right way to help you show it." After Amelia went to bed that night, Mr. Rodriguez asked Grace to stay for a more detailed conversation about his daughter's education. "I'll be honest," he said, sitting across from her in his study. "I was prepared to dismiss your methods as unserious. But the evidence of Amelia's progress is undeniable. She's not just learning academic skills, she's developing genuine confidence and curiosity. Those emotional and social aspects of learning are just as important as the academic content, Grace explained. A child who believes in her own capabilities will continue growing and learning throughout her life. A child who's convinced she's incapable will struggle no matter how much tutoring she receives. You seem to understand child development quite well for A. He paused, realizing he was about to say something potentially offensive. For a housekeeper? Grace finished gently. Mr. Rodriguez, there are things about my background that might surprise you. She had been debating whether to reveal her teaching credentials, knowing it might change their dynamic but also realizing that Amelia's continued progress might depend on full transparency. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education and 5 years of classroom teaching experience, Grace continued. I left teaching when my daughter was born and I needed more flexible employment to support us as a single mother. Mr. Rodriguez stared at her in shock. You're a trained educator? Why didn't you mention this when you applied for the housekeeping position? Because I needed the job and I was afraid that being overqualified might work against me. Many employers hesitate to hire people with credentials that exceed the position requirements. But you're wasted as a housekeeper, he said, his business mind immediately recognizing the inefficiency. Your skills are being completely underutilized. Grace smiled sadly. Sometimes life requires us to take whatever opportunities are available, regardless of our training or preferences. I've been grateful for the stability this job has provided for my family. They sat in silence for a moment as Mr. Rodriguez processed this new information. Finally he spoke again, his voice thoughtful and less formal than usual. Grace, I owe you an apology. I've been underestimating both you and my daughter. What would you need to continue working with Amelia in a more formal capacity? You mean as her tutor instead of as the housekeeper who helps with homework? Grace asked, her heart beginning to race with possibility. I mean as her private teacher, with appropriate compensation and recognition for your qualifications and the remarkable results you're achieving. Grace felt tears spring to her eyes as she realized that her willingness to take a risk on Amelia was about to transform her own life in ways she'd never dared to dream. The next morning brought a new energy to the Rodriguez household. Mr. Rodriguez had spent most of the night thinking about Grace's revelation and what it meant for Amelia's future education. When Grace arrived for work, she found an envelope waiting for her with her name written in Mr. Rodriguez's careful handwriting. Inside was a formal letter offering her the position of Amelia's private tutor, with a salary that was more than double what she earned as a housekeeper. The letter also included a request for a detailed educational plan and permission to design a complete learning curriculum tailored specifically to Amelia's needs. Grace read the letter 3 times before the reality sank in. After years of cleaning houses and suppressing her teaching instincts, she was being invited to return to the work she loved most. But more than that, she was being entrusted with the education of a child who had become precious to her. Grace! Grace! Amelia called out, running into the kitchen where Grace stood holding the letter. Papa said you're going to be my real teacher now. Is that true? Are you really going to teach me every day instead of just helping with homework? It looks that way, sweet pea, Grace said, kneeling down to Amelia's level. How do you feel about that idea? It's the best thing ever. Amelia exclaimed, throwing her arms around Grace's neck. You make learning feel like an adventure instead of a punishment. I want to learn everything you can teach me. As they settled into their morning routine, Grace felt a mix of excitement and nervous responsibility. She was being given the opportunity to create an ideal educational environment for a child who desperately needed it, but she also understood that the stakes were higher now. This was no longer a casual arrangement, it was a professional commitment with real consequences. Before we start our lessons today, Grace said, pulling out a special notebook she'd prepared, I want to share something important with you. Something about my own family that might help you understand why helping you learn means so much to me. Amelia settled into her favorite spot on the living room floor, surrounded by the colorful learning materials that had become as familiar as toys. Tell me everything, she said eagerly. I have a daughter who's just a little older than you, Grace began, opening the notebook to show pictures of a bright-eyed 8-year-old with natural hair styled in neat braids. Her name is Destiny, and she's faced some of the same learning challenges you've been working through. She looks really nice, Amelia said, studying the photos with interest. Does she live far away? She lives with me in our apartment across town. Every night after I finish work here, I go home and help her with her homework, just like I've been helping you. Amelia's expression grew thoughtful as she processed this information. So when you're teaching me, you're practicing for teaching her too? In a way, yes. But more than that, when I see you struggling with something that seems impossible, I remember how it feels to watch your own child face those same struggles. Remember how much it means to have someone believe in you when you're ready to give up on yourself." Grace turned to another page in the notebook, showing pictures of herself in a classroom surrounded by young students. "These are photos from when I was a teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. I loved that job more than anything and I was good at it. But when Destiny was born, I had to make some difficult choices." "What kind of choices?" Amelia asked, sensing the sadness in Grace's voice. "Teaching doesn't pay very much money, especially for single mothers who have to pay for childcare and health insurance and all the things families need. When Destiny was a baby, I couldn't afford to work as a teacher and also provide everything she needed." Amelia leaned closer, her young mind trying to understand the complex realities of adult life. "So you had to stop doing the job you loved?" "I had to stop teaching in a classroom, but I never stopped being a teacher in my heart. Every day, I looked for ways to help children learn and grow, even when my official job was cleaning houses or working in offices." "Is that why you were so good at helping me? Because you're really a teacher inside even when you're doing other jobs?" Grace smiled at the child's perceptive question. "Exactly. And now, because your papa has given me this wonderful opportunity, I get to be a teacher again officially. I get to do the work I love while also providing better for my own daughter. Can I meet Destiny sometime?" Amelia asked eagerly. Maybe she could come here and we could all learn together. The innocent suggestion made Grace's heart swell with affection for this generous, kind-hearted child. "I think that could be arranged if your papa doesn't mind. You two would probably become great friends." They spent the rest of the morning working on an ambitious project Grace called Building Your Learning Foundation. Instead of focusing on isolated skills, they created integrated activities that combined reading, writing, math, science, and creative expression into meaningful, interconnected experiences. "Today we're going to design and build a fairy tale castle," Grace explained, spreading out graph paper, measuring tools, and art supplies. "But this isn't just an art project. We're going to use geometry to plan the shapes, arithmetic to calculate measurements, writing to create stories about who lives there, and reading to research how real castles were built." Amelia's eyes grew wide with excitement as she realized the scope of their project. "You mean we get to do all my favorite things at the same time?" "That's exactly what I mean. Real learning doesn't happen in separate boxes labeled math, and reading, and science. It all connects together just like in real life." As they worked, Grace observed Amelia's natural learning patterns and preferences, making mental notes about teaching strategies that resonated most strongly with the child's individual style. She watched Amelia solve complex problems intuitively, demonstrate creative thinking, and show remarkable persistence when projects captured her interest. "Grace," Amelia said thoughtfully as she carefully measured walls for their castle design, "when you had to stop teaching, were you sad?" "I was heartbroken," Grace admitted honestly. "I felt like I was giving up part of who I really was. But I also knew I was making the choice that was best for Destiny, and that gave me strength to keep going." "And now you get to be yourself again?" The simple question hit Grace with unexpected emotional force. "Yes, sweet pea. Now I get to be myself again, and it's partly because you gave me the chance to show what I could do." "I gave you a chance?" Amelia asked, confused. "When you were willing to trust me and try learning in a new way, you gave me the opportunity to prove that I still knew how to teach. Your success made it possible for your papa to see my real abilities." Amelia considered this carefully, then smiled with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her 6 years. "So we helped each other, didn't we? I helped you remember you're a teacher, and you helped me remember I'm smart. We absolutely did help each other. And that's how the best relationships work. Both people grow and become better because they're together." That afternoon, Mr. Rodriguez stopped by the living room to check on their progress and found himself amazed by the complexity and creativity of their castle project. Amelia was explaining architectural principles she'd learned, demonstrating math skills through practical application, and telling elaborate stories about the characters who would inhabit their creation. "This is quite impressive," he said, genuinely surprised by the sophistication of the work. "Amelia, can you explain how you calculated the proportions for these towers?" "Grace taught me that if the base is 3 inches wide, then the height should be about 9 inches to look right," Amelia replied confidently. "That's multiplication. 3 times 3 equals 9. And we used a ruler to make sure everything was exact." Mr. Rodriguez looked at Grace with new respect. "You're teaching her multiplication concepts? Isn't that advanced for first grade? Children can understand mathematical relationships much earlier than traditional curricula suggest, as long as the concepts are presented through concrete, meaningful activities, Grace explained. Amelia is naturally curious about how numbers work. I'm just giving her opportunities to explore that curiosity. The results speak for themselves, he said, watching as Amelia continued working with focus and enthusiasm. I have to admit, Grace, this approach is producing outcomes I never expected. After he left, Amelia looked up from her project with a satisfied expression. Papa seems happier about my learning now, doesn't he? He does. And more importantly, how do you feel about your learning? I feel like I'm becoming the person I was always supposed to be, Amelia said thoughtfully. Like all the smart parts of me were just hiding, waiting for someone who knew how to find them. Grace felt her eyes fill with tears at the profound wisdom in the child's words. In just a few weeks, Amelia had transformed from a defeated, anxious child into a confident, curious learner who understood her own potential. Sweet pea, you are absolutely becoming who you were always meant to be. And watching that happen has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. As they cleaned up their materials at the end of the day, both Grace and Amelia felt the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work shared with someone who truly understands you. They were building more than academic skills. They were creating a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual growth that would strengthen both their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, the Rodriguez household had transformed into a place of laughter and discovery. Amelia woke up each morning excited about the day's learning adventures, and Grace found herself rediscovering the joy and creativity that had originally drawn her to teaching. Grace, look what I figured out. Amelia called from the living room, where she was working independently on a math game Grace had created. If I have 15 stickers and I want to share them equally among 3 friends, each friend gets 5 stickers. That's division, isn't it? It absolutely is. Grace replied, emerging from the kitchen with a proud smile. And you figured that out all by yourself. How did you know to solve it that way? I remembered what you said about division being like sharing fairly. So I pretended I had 3 dolls and I gave each one the same number of stickers until they were all gone. Amelia demonstrated her thinking process using actual toys, showing Grace exactly how she'd worked through the problem. Grace marveled at how naturally Amelia had developed problem-solving strategies when given the freedom to think through challenges in her own way. The child who had once been paralyzed by math worksheets was now approaching numerical concepts with confidence and creativity. You know what? I think you're ready for a special surprise, Grace said, pulling out a wrapped package she'd been saving for exactly this moment. Amelia's eyes widened with excitement as she carefully unwrapped a beautiful hardcover book titled, Advanced Problem Solving for Young Mathematicians. The cover featured colorful illustrations and puzzles that looked both challenging and fun. This is a real math book for kids who love thinking about numbers, Grace explained. It's got puzzles and brain teasers and problems that don't have just one right answer. I thought you might enjoy the challenge. It's perfect, Amelia exclaimed, immediately flipping through the pages and studying the various activities. Look, this one is about patterns in nature and this one is about building bridges with different shapes. These aren't like those boring worksheets at all. As Amelia dove into exploring her new book, Grace reflected on how dramatically their relationship had evolved. What had started as a professional tutoring arrangement had deepened into something that felt remarkably like a family bond. Grace found herself thinking about Amelia throughout her evenings, planning special activities and looking forward to seeing the child's reactions to new discoveries. Grace, Amelia said thoughtfully, looking up from a particularly intriguing puzzle, do you think your daughter would like books like this too? I'm sure she would. Destiny loves challenges just like you do. Actually, I've been thinking it might be time for you two to meet if you're still interested. Amelia bounced with excitement at the suggestion. Could she come here? Could we work on projects together? Maybe we could teach each other things we're good at. I think that's a wonderful idea. Let me talk to your papa about arranging a playdate that's also a learning session. That evening, Grace approached Mr. Rodriguez with the suggestion, explaining how beneficial it could be for Amelia to have a learning partner closer to her own age. She was nervous about introducing her personal life more directly into her professional relationship, but she felt strongly that both girls would benefit from the connection. I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Rodriguez said, surprising her with his immediate enthusiasm. Amelia needs more interaction with children who share her interests and abilities. And frankly, I'd like to meet the daughter of the woman who's made such a remarkable difference in my child's life. The following Saturday, Grace arrived with Destiny, who had spent the entire morning asking questions about Amelia and preparing herself to meet someone new. 8-year-old Destiny was tall for her age, with intelligent eyes and a shy smile that reminded Grace of herself at that age. "Amelia, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Destiny," Grace said as the two girls studied each other with mutual curiosity. "Hi," Amelia said softly, suddenly feeling bashful about meeting this important person from Grace's other life. "Grace talks about you all the time. She says you're really smart and really kind." "She talks about you all the time too," Destiny replied with a grin. "She says you're an amazing learner and that you ask the best questions." Within minutes, the initial shyness had evaporated as the girls discovered their shared love of stories, puzzles, and creative projects. Grace watched with deep satisfaction as they immediately began collaborating on a complex building project, naturally teaching each other different skills and approaches. "Destiny, how did you make that tower so straight?" Amelia asked, studying her new friend's construction technique. "My mama taught me about using a level to make sure things are even," Destiny explained, demonstrating the concept. "Want me to show you?" "Yes. And I can show you this cool way to make patterns with the blocks that Grace taught me. It's like math and art at the same time." Mr. Rodriguez, who had been observing from a distance, was struck by how naturally the girls fell into a collaborative learning dynamic. He found himself thinking about his own childhood, remembering how much more enjoyable school had been when he'd had friends who shared his interests. "Grace," he said quietly, "watching them together makes me realize how isolated Amelia has been. She's been struggling not just academically but socially too. Children who feel different or unsuccessful in traditional school settings often become withdrawn," Grace explained. "But when they find peers who appreciate their unique qualities, they blossom. Destiny went through something similar before I learned how to advocate for different teaching approaches." As the afternoon progressed, it became clear that the girls had formed an instant and powerful friendship. They worked together seamlessly, challenged each other intellectually, and supported each other emotionally in ways that both Grace and Mr. Rodriguez found deeply moving. "Mama," Destiny said when it was time to leave, "could Amelia come to our apartment next time? I want to show her my science experiment kit and the story I'm writing about a girl who becomes a teacher like you." "I would love that," Amelia added eagerly. "And maybe Destiny could stay for dinner here sometime? Papa, would that be okay?" Mr. Rodriguez found himself genuinely touched by his daughter's obvious happiness and the depth of her new friendship. "I think that's a wonderful idea. In fact, Grace, I'd like to invite both you and Destiny to dinner here next Friday evening. It's time I properly thanked you for everything you've done for our family." Grace felt overwhelmed by the generosity of the invitation and the warmth in Mr. Rodriguez's voice. "That's very kind of you. We'd be honored to join you." After Grace and Destiny left, Amelia was practically glowing with happiness. She spent the evening telling her father everything she'd learned from Destiny and making plans for future projects they could work on together. "Papa," she said as he tucked her into bed, "I think this was one of the best days of my whole life. Not just because I made a new friend but because I felt normal for the first time. Like I wasn't the weird kid who couldn't learn right." The words hit Mr. Rodriguez with unexpected force. He realized that in his focus on academic achievement and conventional success, he'd lost sight of his daughter's emotional needs and social development. "Amelia, you were never weird or wrong. I'm sorry if my worry about your grades made you feel that way. You're a remarkable child with a beautiful mind, and I'm proud of who you are." "Grace taught me that there are lots of different ways to be smart," Amelia said sleepily. "And Destiny showed me that other kids can understand those different ways too. I feel like I finally found my people." As Mr. Rodriguez turned off the lights and headed to his own room, he found himself reflecting on the profound changes that had occurred in his household since Grace had entered their lives. His daughter was thriving academically, but more importantly, she was developing confidence, forming meaningful friendships, and discovering joy in learning. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely optimistic about Amelia's future. More than that, he was beginning to understand that success looked different than he'd originally imagined, and that the most important measures of his daughter's growth were her happiness, curiosity, and sense of self-worth. In her own apartment that night, Grace tucked Destiny into bed and listened as her daughter shared her excitement about meeting Amelia and spending time in the beautiful mansion. "Mama, I really like Amelia's papa," Destiny said thoughtfully. "He seems sad sometimes but he loves her a lot. I can tell because he watches her the same way you watch me when you think I'm not looking." Grace smiled at her daughter's perceptive observation. "You're very wise, baby girl. Mr. Rodriguez is a good man who's learning how to be the best father he can be, just like I'm always learning how to be the best mother I can be. Are we going to keep being friends with them for a long time?" Destiny asked hopefully. "I think we are, sweetheart. I think we're all becoming an extended family, and that's a beautiful thing. As Grace settled into her own bed, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected turns her life had taken. What had begun as a job cleaning someone else's house had evolved into an opportunity to return to her true calling while building meaningful relationships that enriched all their lives. She drifted off to sleep thinking about the dinner invitation and the continued growth she was witnessing in both Amelia and Mr. Rodriguez. Something special was happening in their little community, and Grace had a feeling the best was yet to come. 2 months into their new educational arrangement, Grace received news that would test everything they had built together. Mr. Rodriguez called her into his study one evening with a serious expression that immediately put her on high alert. "Grace, I've received some concerning feedback from the district regarding Amelia's upcoming assessment requirements," he began, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Apparently, all children her age must take standardized placement tests by the end of next month to determine their readiness for 2nd grade. Grace felt her stomach drop. Standardized tests were exactly the kind of traditional assessment that didn't account for different learning styles or alternative educational approaches. Everything Amelia had achieved through creative, hands-on learning might not translate to success on a conventional test format. "What exactly will the assessment cover?" Grace asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing concern. "Reading comprehension, basic mathematics, writing skills, and something called academic readiness indicators. The results will determine whether Amelia can advance to 2nd grade or whether she'll need to repeat 1st grade. Mr. Rodriguez paused, studying Grace's expression. "I can see you're concerned about this." "I am concerned," Grace admitted honestly. "Amelia has made tremendous progress, but standardized tests often don't capture the real learning that's taken place. They measure specific skills in very particular formats that may not reflect what a child actually knows." "Are you saying she's not ready for 2nd grade?" he asked, his voice taking on an edge of the old anxiety that had marked his attitude toward Amelia's education. "I'm saying she's more than ready for 2nd grade academically, but she may struggle with the format and pressure of standardized testing. We need to prepare her not just for the content, but for the experience of taking that kind of test." That night, Grace went home feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. She knew Amelia's intelligence and capabilities, but she also understood how easily a bright child could be derailed by test anxiety or unfamiliar question formats. "Mama, you look worried," Destiny observed as they sat together at their small kitchen table. "Is everything okay with Amelia?" Grace explained the situation to her daughter, who listened with the serious attention of a child who had faced similar academic challenges. "You know what helped me when I had to take those scary tests?" Destiny suggested. "You taught me that tests are just one way to show what I know, not the only way. And you made me practice the weird test questions until they didn't seem so weird anymore." "That's very wise advice, baby girl. I think we're going to need to help Amelia learn test-taking strategies without losing the confidence and love of learning she's developed." The next morning, Grace arrived at the Rodriguez mansion with a carefully planned approach to test preparation that would build on Amelia's strengths while addressing the specific requirements of standardized assessment. "Good morning, my favorite student," Grace said warmly as Amelia bounded into the kitchen. "I have something important to talk to you about, and then we're going to start a new kind of learning adventure." Amelia immediately sensed the seriousness in Grace's tone. "Is something wrong? Did I do something bad?" "Nothing's wrong at all, sweet pea. You've been doing everything wonderfully. But there's a special test coming up that we need to prepare for. It's different from the fun learning we usually do, but it's important because it will show other people how much you've learned." Grace explained the upcoming assessment in terms that a 6-year-old could understand, emphasizing that the test was just one snapshot of her abilities, not a judgment of her worth or intelligence. "Will it be like those scary worksheets the tutor used to bring?" Amelia asked nervously. "It will have some similarities, but here's the difference. Now you know how smart you are, and you have strategies for figuring things out. We're going to practice the test format until it feels as comfortable as our regular learning games." Over the next several weeks, Grace carefully balanced test preparation with the creative, engaging methods that had proven so successful for Amelia. They practiced multiple-choice questions using colorful cards, worked on timed exercises through fun games, and developed strategies for staying calm under pressure. "Remember, if you come to a question that seems confusing, what do you do?" Grace would ask during their practice sessions. "Take a deep breath, read it again slowly, and look for words I know," Amelia would respond confidently. "And if I still don't understand, I make my best guess and move on instead of getting stuck." How do you help a child face their biggest fear while keeping their confidence intact? Have you ever had to prepare for something that felt impossible? Let us know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Grace also worked extensively on building Amelia's stamina for sustained focus, since the test would require concentration for longer periods than their usual learning sessions. They gradually increased the length of their practice activities while maintaining the supportive, encouraging atmosphere that had made learning feel safe and enjoyable. "I'm getting tired," Amelia said during one particularly long practice session, demonstrating exactly the kind of fatigue she might experience during the actual test. "That's perfectly normal," Grace responded calmly. "Let's practice our energy renewal strategies. What can you do to help your brain feel fresh again?" "Stretch my arms up high, take 5 deep breaths and remind myself that I'm smart and capable," Amelia replied, implementing the techniques they'd practiced. As the test date approached, Grace noticed that Mr. Rodriguez was becoming increasingly anxious about the results. He began asking daily questions about Amelia's readiness and expressing doubts about whether their non-traditional approach had adequately prepared her for conventional assessment. "Grace, are you certain she's ready for this?" he asked one evening after observing a practice session. "The stakes feel very high. If she doesn't pass, it could affect her entire academic trajectory." "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand your concern, but I need you to trust the process we've built together. Amelia is academically prepared and more importantly, she's emotionally prepared. Your confidence in her abilities will make a huge difference in how she approaches this challenge." The week before the test, Grace arranged for Destiny to spend the afternoon working alongside Amelia, both girls practicing test-taking strategies together. Having her friend's support helped Amelia feel less isolated in facing this challenge. "You know what I learned about tests?" Destiny said as they worked through practice questions together. "They can't measure how creative you are, or how kind you are, or how good you are at solving real problems. They just measure whether you can answer their specific questions in their specific way. So even if I don't do perfectly, it doesn't mean I'm not smart?" Amelia asked. "Exactly. It just means you're smart in ways that tests can't always see," Destiny confirmed. The night before the assessment, Grace stayed late to help Amelia feel as prepared and confident as possible. They reviewed key strategies, practiced relaxation techniques, and talked through what the testing environment would be like. "I'm scared," Amelia admitted as Grace tucked her into bed. "What if I forget everything we've learned? What if my brain stops working when I see those test questions?" Grace sat on the edge of the bed and took Amelia's small hands in her own. "Sweet pea, your brain is strong and wonderful, and all your learning is safely stored inside it. Tomorrow you're just going to show some strangers a tiny piece of what you know. Remember, this test doesn't define you. It's just one day, one experience, one small part of your learning journey. Will you be proud of me no matter what happens?" "I will be proud of you always, no matter what any test says. You are brave, intelligent, creative, and kind. Those qualities don't depend on test scores and they never will." The morning of the assessment arrived gray and drizzly, matching the nervous energy that filled the Rodriguez household. Grace arrived early to help Amelia eat a good breakfast and engage in their usual morning routine, maintaining as much normalcy as possible. "Today's the day, isn't it?" Amelia said, looking small in her carefully chosen outfit. A bright yellow dress that made her feel confident and comfortable shoes for the walking required to get to the testing location. "Today's the day you get to show off some of what you've learned," Grace confirmed. "And tomorrow we'll be back to our regular fun learning adventures, no matter what happens today." As they prepared to leave for the testing center, Mr. Rodriguez appeared with an expression of barely controlled anxiety. Grace could see that his nervousness was beginning to affect Amelia, who was picking up on the adult tension around her. "Papa, are you worried about my test?" Amelia asked directly. Mr. Rodriguez knelt down to his daughter's level, seeming to realize the impact of his own emotional state. "I'm not worried about you, sweetheart. I know you're smart and capable. I'm just hoping the test is able to see how wonderful you are. Grace taught me that tests are just tools like rulers or clocks. They measure some things but not everything important," Amelia said with surprising wisdom. "Grace taught you well," he replied, looking at Grace with gratitude and respect. "Now go show them what you can do, and remember that your family believes in you completely." As they drove to the testing center, Grace used the time to help Amelia transition into her calm, focused mindset. They practiced breathing exercises, reviewed key strategies one final time, and talked about plans for celebrating together afterward, regardless of the results. "Remember," Grace said as they approached the building, "you are not just taking a test today. You are showing the world a glimpse of the amazing person you are. And no matter what happens, I will be right here waiting for you when you're finished." Amelia nodded bravely and gave Grace a tight hug before walking into the testing room with her head held high. Grace watched through the window as her student took her seat among the other children, pulled out her pencils with confidence, and began the assessment that would determine so much of her immediate academic future. The next 3 hours felt like the longest of Grace's life as she waited in the parent area, alternating between prayer and positive visualization. She thought about everything Amelia had accomplished, all the growth and learning and confidence building they had achieved together. Whatever the test results showed, Grace knew that Amelia had already succeeded in the most important ways. 3 weeks after the assessment, Grace arrived at the Rodriguez mansion to find Mr. Rodriguez waiting in the foyer with an official-looking envelope in his hands and an expression she couldn't quite read. "The test results arrived this morning," he said without preamble. "Would you like to review them together before we tell Amelia?" Grace's heart pounded as she followed him into his study. They had continued their regular learning activities during the waiting period, but the pending results had created an undercurrent of tension that affected everyone in the household. Mr. Rodriguez opened the envelope carefully and spread the documents across his desk. Grace leaned forward to read the scores and assessments, her trained eye quickly interpreting the various metrics and percentile rankings. Reading comprehension, 94th percentile, she read aloud, her voice growing stronger with each positive result. Mathematical reasoning, 89th percentile. Written expression, 92nd percentile. Overall academic readiness, exemplary. They stared at each other in amazement as the full magnitude of Amelia's success became clear. Not only had she passed the assessment, she had scored in the top 10% of all children her age in nearly every category. "This is remarkable," Mr. Rodriguez said, shaking his head in wonder. "These scores indicate that she's performing at or above grade level in all areas. Some of these results suggest she's ready for advanced coursework." "I'm not surprised by her capabilities," Grace said with quiet pride, "but I am thrilled that the test was able to capture what we've known all along. Amelia is exceptionally bright and capable when given the right support and teaching methods." "Grace, I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude," Mr. Rodriguez said, his formal tone softening with genuine emotion. "You've transformed my daughter's entire educational trajectory. More than that, you've given her confidence and joy in learning that I was afraid she might never experience. Watching Amelia discover her own potential has been one of the greatest privileges of my life," Grace replied. "She did the hard work of learning and growing. I just provided the right environment and methods for her natural abilities to shine." They found Amelia in the living room, working on a complex art project that incorporated geometric patterns and mathematical sequences. She looked up when they entered, immediately sensing the significance of their expressions. "Did my test results come?" she asked, setting down her markers and giving them her full attention. "They did," Mr. Rodriguez said, kneeling down beside her chair. "And I am incredibly proud to tell you that you scored in the top 10% of all children your age. You not only passed the assessment, you excelled at it." Amelia's face went through a series of expressions as she processed this information: surprise, disbelief, and finally, glowing pride. "Really? I did really well? The test could actually see how much I learned." "It absolutely could," Grace confirmed, sitting down beside her. "All that hard work, all those creative learning methods, all your persistence and curiosity, it all came together to show the world how brilliant you are. Does this mean I don't have to go to boarding school?" Amelia asked, the question revealing how deeply that threat had affected her throughout their months together. "You're definitely staying right here with us," her father assured her. "In fact, based on these results, we need to start thinking about advanced educational opportunities that will continue to challenge and inspire you." That evening, the Rodriguez family celebrated with a special dinner that included both Grace and Destiny as honored guests. Mr. Rodriguez had arranged for a beautiful cake decorated with academic achievement themes, and he raised a toast to Amelia's success. "To my brilliant daughter, who never gave up on herself, and to Grace, who saw potential when others saw only problems," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And to Destiny, who showed me that smart kids can be friends and help each other learn," Amelia added, lifting her glass of sparkling apple cider. As they enjoyed their celebration dinner, Mr. Rodriguez made an announcement that would change Grace's life in ways she had never dared to imagine. "Grace, I've been doing a lot of thinking about Amelia's continued education and your role in our family's future," he began. "I would like to offer you a permanent position as Amelia's private educator, with a substantial salary increase and full benefits for both you and Destiny." Grace felt her breath catch as she processed the magnitude of this offer. "Mr. Rodriguez, that's incredibly generous, but I want to make sure you understand what you're proposing. Private education at this level is typically very expensive. You've proven that your teaching methods produce exceptional results, he replied firmly. More importantly, you've shown genuine care for Amelia's emotional and intellectual development. That combination of professional excellence and personal investment is invaluable. There's something else, he continued, his expression growing even more serious. I've been researching private schools for gifted children, and I've discovered that many of them employ teaching philosophies very similar to your approach. I think Amelia would benefit from being around other children who learn differently and think creatively. Grace looked at Amelia, who was listening intently to this conversation about her future. What do you think about that idea, sweet pea? Would you like to go to a school where other children learn the way you do? Could I go there and still work with you too? Amelia asked hopefully. I don't want to stop learning in our special way. If Grace is willing, I'd like her to continue as your primary educator while also incorporating some group learning experiences with other advanced students, Mr. Rodriguez explained. I would be honored to continue working with Amelia in whatever capacity best serves her educational needs, Grace said, feeling overwhelmed by the trust and generosity being shown to her family. Later that evening, as Grace and Destiny prepared to leave, Amelia presented them with a handmade book she had created as a surprise. I wrote this story about everything that happened to us, she said shyly, handing Grace the carefully bound pages. It's about a little girl who thought she was dumb until a magical teacher helped her discover she was really smart all along. Grace opened the book to find beautifully illustrated pages telling their story from Amelia's perspective, complete with detailed drawings of their learning activities and heartfelt descriptions of how their relationship had changed both their lives. This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Grace said, tears flowing freely as she read her students' words. Thank you for trusting me with your education and your friendship. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else could, Amelia replied, hugging Grace tightly. As they drove home that night, Destiny looked at her mother with proud, thoughtful eyes. Mama, you changed that whole family's life, didn't you? We all changed each other's lives, baby girl. That's what happens when people care about each other and work together towards something important. Are we going to be part of their family now? Grace considered the question carefully, thinking about the profound bonds that had formed between all of them over the past months. I think we already are part of their family and they're part of ours. Sometimes families aren't just the people you're born with. Sometimes they're the people who choose to love and support each other. That night, as Grace tucked Destiny into bed in their modest apartment, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a desperate need for employment had evolved into the fulfillment of dreams she had almost given up on. Mama, Destiny said sleepily, I'm proud of you for helping Amelia. And I'm proud of her for working so hard. And I'm proud of us for being brave enough to make new friends. I'm proud of all of us too, sweetheart. Tomorrow is going to bring new adventures for our whole extended family. As Grace settled into her own bed, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and anticipation for the future. Amelia's success on the assessment had validated everything they had worked toward together, but more importantly, it had opened doors to continued growth and learning for all of them. She fell asleep thinking about lesson plans and learning objectives, but also about family dinners and holiday celebrations and all the ways their lives had become beautifully intertwined. Sometimes the most important victories were measured not in test scores, but in the bonds of love and respect that grew between people who believed in each other's potential. The Monday following Amelia's test results brought an unexpected visitor to the Rodriguez mansion. Grace arrived to find a distinguished woman in an elegant suit sitting in the living room with Mr. Rodriguez, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation. Grace, perfect timing, Mr. Rodriguez said as she entered. I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Hamilton, the director of the Westfield Academy for Gifted and Creative Learning. Dr. Hamilton, this is Grace Washington, Amelia's private educator. Dr. Hamilton rose with a warm smile and extended her hand. Ms. Washington, I've heard remarkable things about your work with Amelia. Mr. Rodriguez shared her assessment results with me, and I was quite impressed by the progress she's made under your guidance. Grace shook her hand politely, curious about the purpose of this visit but maintaining her professional composure. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. Amelia is an exceptional student who simply needed the right approach to learning. That's precisely why I'm here, Dr. Hamilton continued. Westfield Academy specializes in educating children who think differently and require innovative teaching methods. Based on what I've learned about your approach, I believe both Amelia and our other students could benefit significantly from your expertise. Mr. Rodriguez gestured for them all to sit down. Dr. Hamilton has made an interesting proposal that I wanted you to hear directly. Ms. Washington, would you be interested in joining our faculty as a specialist in alternative learning methodologies? Dr. Hamilton asked. We have several students who aren't thriving under traditional approaches, and we believe your background and proven success could make a tremendous difference in their educational experience. Grace felt her heart race at the unexpected opportunity. That's very flattering, Dr. Hamilton, but I'm committed to continuing Amelia's education. We've built something very special together, and I wouldn't want to abandon that progress. I wouldn't expect you to, Dr. Hamilton replied with a smile. What I'm proposing is a unique arrangement where you would teach a small group of students who learn similarly to Amelia, with her included in that group. You would essentially be creating a specialized classroom environment within our school. A classroom designed around the teaching methods that have proven so successful with Amelia? Grace asked, beginning to understand the scope of what was being offered. Exactly. You would have complete freedom to design curriculum and implement the creative, hands-on approaches that have produced such remarkable results. We would provide resources, support staff, and a beautiful facility, while you would provide the educational expertise and innovation. Mr. Rodriguez looked at Grace intently. I want to make it clear that whatever you decide, Amelia's education remains your priority. This opportunity would only move forward if it enhances rather than compromises what you've built with her. Grace felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity being presented. Not only would she be returning to formal teaching, but she would be doing so with complete creative control and the resources to implement her vision on a larger scale. Could I observe your current programs and meet with your staff before making a decision? Grace asked thoughtfully. I'd want to ensure that the school's philosophy truly aligns with the approaches that have been successful for Amelia. Absolutely, Dr. Hamilton replied. In fact, I'd like to invite you and Amelia to spend a day at Westfield Academy next week. You can observe our current programs, meet our students and faculty, and get a sense of whether this feels like the right environment for both of you. That afternoon, Grace and Amelia discussed the opportunity together, with Grace being careful to present it as a possibility rather than a definite plan. So I would still be your student, but I would also have other kids to learn with? Amelia asked, trying to understand how this new arrangement might work. That's right. And those other children would be kids who learn the way you do, kids who are creative and smart but need different teaching methods to show their abilities. Amelia's face lit up with excitement. Like destiny. I could help other kids feel the way I felt when you started teaching me? You absolutely could. In fact, you might be able to help me teach them some of the strategies that work best for you. The idea of being able to help other children resonated deeply with Amelia, who remembered all too clearly how it felt to be misunderstood and underestimated in educational settings. The following week, Grace and Amelia visited Westfield Academy for their observation day. The campus was beautiful, with spacious classrooms, abundant natural light, and learning environments designed to accommodate different types of activities and group sizes. Look at this science lab, Amelia whispered in amazement as they toured the facilities. They have microscopes and experiment stations and everything. And look at this library, Grace added, equally impressed by the extensive collection of books and the comfortable reading nooks designed for independent study. They observed several classes in session, watching as teachers used innovative methods to engage students in learning experiences that looked remarkably similar to the approaches Grace had developed with Amelia. Children were moving around, working with manipulatives, collaborating on projects, and demonstrating genuine enthusiasm for academic challenges. Ms. Washington, said one of the teachers they met, we've heard about your success with creative math instruction. I'd love to learn more about your methods for helping children understand abstract concepts through concrete experiences. I'd be happy to share what I've learned, Grace replied, feeling energized by the prospect of collaborating with other educators who valued innovative teaching approaches. During lunch, they met several students who were around Amelia's age and ability level. Grace watched as her student interacted confidently with these new potential classmates, sharing ideas and asking thoughtful questions about their learning experiences. I like it here, Amelia confided to Grace during a quiet moment. These kids seem like they understand what it's like to be different. And the teachers remind me of you. How do they remind you of me? Grace asked, curious about the child's perspective. They listen to what kids say and they seem excited about teaching, not tired or frustrated. And they let kids move around and ask lots of questions. That evening, Grace, Amelia, and Mr. Rodriguez sat down for a serious conversation about the opportunity at Westfield Academy. I think this could be wonderful for Amelia's continued development, Grace said thoughtfully. She would benefit from being around intellectual peers while still receiving the individualized attention she needs. What about your own career goals? Mr. Rodriguez asked. This seems like it could be a significant opportunity for professional growth. Grace smiled, thinking about how dramatically her life had changed since that first day when she'd offered to help Amelia with her homework. A year ago I thought my teaching career was over. I never imagined I'd have the chance to not only return to education, but to do so with the freedom to implement approaches I truly believe in. So you want to accept their offer? Amelia asked hopefully. I want to accept it if you're excited about being part of this new adventure, Grace replied. This decision affects both of us and I want to make sure you feel good about the change. I'm excited, Amelia said immediately. I think it would be amazing to learn with other kids who are like me, and I think you would be an incredible teacher for all of them. Mr. Rodriguez had been listening to their conversation with growing emotion. Finally he spoke up with his voice slightly thick with feeling. Grace, watching you transform my daughter's life has been one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. You've shown me what genuine care and expertise can accomplish when they're combined with unwavering belief in a child's potential. He paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. I want to do more than just support this career opportunity for you. I want to ensure that you have everything you need to succeed in this new role. What do you mean? Grace asked, puzzled by his serious tone. I'm prepared to establish an educational foundation that will provide ongoing support for your innovative teaching methods, not just at Westfield Academy, but for other children who need alternative approaches to learning. Grace stared at him in shock as the magnitude of his proposal became clear. Mr. Rodriguez, that's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting. I'm suggesting that your work with Amelia has convinced me that there are probably thousands of children who are struggling in traditional educational settings simply because no one has taken the time to understand how they learn best. I want to fund research, training, and program development that could help those children. You want to create a foundation dedicated to alternative education methods? I want to create a foundation dedicated to ensuring that children like Amelia have access to teachers like you. People who see potential instead of problems, who adapt their methods to serve their students rather than expecting students to adapt to rigid systems. Amelia looked between Grace and her father with growing excitement as she began to understand the scope of what was being discussed. Papa, does this mean Grace's special way of teaching could help lots and lots of kids? That's exactly what it means, sweetheart. And it's all because you were brave enough to trust a new approach to learning, and Grace was brave enough to believe in your potential. Grace felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized that her willingness to take a risk on one struggling child had somehow evolved into an opportunity that could impact countless other children facing similar challenges. I don't know what to say, she whispered. This is beyond anything I ever dreamed possible. Say you'll accept the position at Westfield Academy, Mr. Rodriguez replied with a smile. Say you'll let me help you reach more children who need what you have to offer. And say you'll continue to be part of our family, because Amelia and I can't imagine our lives without you. As Grace looked around at the faces of the people who had become so precious to her, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought them all together. What had started as a simple offer to help with homework had grown into something that would reshape all their futures in beautiful, meaningful ways. Yes, she said firmly, her voice growing stronger with each word. Yes to all of it. Let's change some lives together. 6 months later, Grace stood in her new classroom at Westfield Academy, watching as 12 special students worked collaboratively on a complex project that integrated art, science, mathematics, and creative writing. The walls were covered with colorful displays of student work, innovative learning tools, and inspirational quotes about the joy of discovery. Miss Grace, look what we figured out, called Marcus, an 8-year-old who had been labeled learning disabled at his previous school but was now thriving under Grace's patient, creative instruction. We found 3 different ways to solve this pattern problem. Show me everything you discovered, Grace replied, kneeling down beside his group to examine their work with genuine enthusiasm. Amelia, now a confident second grader, was helping a newer student understand a math concept by using the same hands-on methods that had once helped her overcome her own struggles. See, if you think of division as sharing equally between friends, it makes more sense than just memorizing rules, Amelia explained patiently. That's how Miss Grace taught me, and now it feels easy. Grace watched this interaction with deep pride, seeing how naturally Amelia had developed into a mentor and leader within their learning community. The child who had once been convinced she was too stupid to learn was now helping other children discover their own potential. Grace, you have a visitor, announced Dr. Hamilton from the classroom doorway. Destiny appeared beside her, now 9 years old and enrolled in the advanced program at her own school. She visited Grace's classroom regularly, having become an unofficial assistant teacher who related especially well to students facing academic challenges. "Mama, I finished my homework early and thought I could help with the afternoon projects," Destiny said, immediately gravitating toward a group of students who were struggling with a reading comprehension exercise. "That would be wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you work with Sarah and James on their story analysis?" As Grace surveyed her classroom full of engaged, confident learners, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them all to this point. The Rodriguez Foundation for Educational Innovation had provided funding for 3 additional teachers to be trained in alternative learning methodologies, and similar programs were being established at schools across the state. "Ms. Washington," called Dr. Hamilton from the doorway, "you have another visitor. Mr. Rodriguez is here for his monthly classroom observation." Mr. Rodriguez appeared with his usual warm smile, but Grace could see the deep satisfaction in his expression as he took in the scene of children learning joyfully and effectively under her guidance. "How are my favorite educators today?" he asked, addressing both Grace and the students who had come to know him as a regular supporter of their classroom. "Papa," Amelia called out from across the room where she was working with her learning partner. "Come see the book report we wrote together. We got to choose our own format and we made it into a play." As Mr. Rodriguez moved around the classroom, interacting with students and observing their work, Grace felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The foundation he had established was already making a difference in the lives of dozens of children, with plans for expansion that would eventually reach thousands more. "Grace, could we speak privately for a moment?" Mr. Rodriguez asked as the afternoon session was winding down. They stepped into the hallway where Grace had first met Dr. Hamilton, the space where her life had taken another unexpected turn toward possibilities she had never imagined. "I wanted to give you an update on the Foundation's progress," he began. "We've received applications from 15 school districts requesting training programs for their teachers. The research component is producing data that validates what we already knew. Children learn better when teaching methods are adapted to their individual needs rather than forcing all students into the same educational mold." "That's wonderful news," Grace replied. "But I sense there's something else you wanted to discuss." "There is. The Foundation Board has unanimously voted to offer you the position of Director of Educational Innovation. You would oversee the development and implementation of alternative learning programs nationwide." Grace felt her breath catch as she processed the magnitude of this opportunity. "Mr. Rodriguez, that sounds like an enormous responsibility. It would be an enormous opportunity to impact thousands of children who are currently struggling in educational systems that don't serve their needs. You've proven that with the right approaches and genuine commitment, every child can succeed. Imagine what you could accomplish with the resources to train teachers and develop programs on a national scale. What would happen to my classroom here? To Amelia and the other students I'm working with? You would continue teaching, but you'd also be developing training materials, mentoring other educators, and establishing programs that replicate your success in schools across the country. Think of it as multiplying your impact rather than replacing it." As they talked, Grace watched through the classroom window as Amelia helped pack up materials while chatting animatedly with her classmates. The transformation in this child had been profound, but Grace knew that Amelia's story was being repeated in classrooms wherever teachers were willing to adapt their methods to serve their students' needs. "I need some time to think about it," Grace said finally. "This would be a huge change not just for me but for Destiny and our whole life." "Of course. Take all the time you need. But Grace, I want you to know that your impact has already extended far beyond what you might realize. The children you've taught are developing confidence and skills that will serve them throughout their lives. The teachers you've mentored are carrying your methods to new students. The Foundation's work is changing educational policy at the state level." That evening, Grace sat in the comfortable apartment that the Foundation had provided for her and Destiny, reviewing the formal offer and thinking about the path that had led her to this moment. From cleaning houses to being offered a national leadership role in education, the journey seemed almost impossible to believe. "Mama," Destiny said, curling up beside her on the couch, "you look like you're thinking about something really important." "I am, baby girl. Mr. Rodriguez has offered me a job that could help lots and lots of children, but it would mean traveling more and having bigger responsibilities. Would we still get to see Amelia and her papa regularly?" "Yes, we would. In fact, this job would mean working even more closely with their family. But it would also mean that other families in other cities could get the same kind of help that Amelia received." Destiny considered this thoughtfully. "So more kids like Amelia would get to find out they're really smart?" "Exactly. Then I think you should do it," Destiny said with the simple wisdom that children often possess. You're really good at helping kids feel better about themselves. Other kids should get to have you as their teacher too. The next morning, Grace called Mr. Rodriguez to accept the position. As she spoke the words that would once again transform her career and their lives, she felt the same mixture of nervousness and excitement that had accompanied every major decision in their journey together. 2 weeks later, the Rodriguez household hosted a celebration dinner that had become a regular tradition for their extended family. Grace, Destiny, Amelia, and Mr. Rodriguez gathered around the elegant dining room table, sharing stories about their day and making plans for the future. "Grace, I have something for you," Amelia said shyly, presenting her with a beautifully wrapped package. "It's a going-away present, except you're not really going away, you're just getting an even more important job." Inside the package was a handmade photo album filled with pictures and memories from their time together. Images of their early learning sessions, Amelia's first successful test, their celebration dinners, classroom moments from Westfield Academy, and candid shots of their blended family enjoying various milestones and adventures. "Look at the last page," Amelia said eagerly. Grace turned to find a letter written in Amelia's careful handwriting. "Dear Grace, thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for believing I was smart when everyone else thought I was broken. Thank you for showing me that learning can be fun and that being different is actually special. Because of you, I know I can do anything I set my mind to. I hope you help lots and lots of other kids feel the same way. Love forever, your first and most grateful student, Amelia." Tears streamed down Grace's face as she read the heartfelt words. "Amelia, this is the most precious gift I've ever received. Thank you for trusting me with your education and your friendship." "Thank you for changing my whole life," Amelia replied, hugging Grace tightly. As Grace looked around the table at the faces of the people who had become her chosen family, she marveled at the unexpected ways that life had unfolded. A simple decision to help a struggling child had grown into a career that would touch thousands of lives, relationships that had enriched everyone involved, and a sense of purpose that made every day feel meaningful. "What should we toast to tonight?" Mr. Rodriguez asked, raising his glass of sparkling cider. "To new beginnings," Grace suggested. "To families that choose each other," Destiny added. "To teachers who see potential in every student," Amelia contributed. "To the power of believing in what's possible," Mr. Rodriguez concluded. As they clinked glasses together, each of them felt the deep satisfaction that comes from being part of something larger than themselves. They had created not just individual success stories, but a model for how education could work when it prioritized understanding, patience, and genuine care for each child's unique gifts. Grace fell asleep that night thinking about the children she would meet in her new role, the teachers she would train, and the programs she would develop. But mostly she thought about the 6-year-old girl who had been sitting alone in a mansion study room, convinced she was too stupid to learn, and how that child's courage to try something new had ultimately changed all their lives in the most beautiful ways imaginable. The story that had begun with failure and despair had become one of triumph, connection, and hope for countless futures yet to be written. Sometimes the most important transformations start with the smallest acts of kindness, offered at exactly the right moment, by exactly the right person who refuses to give up on potential that others have overlooked. 5 years later, the Rodriguez Foundation for Educational Innovation had established programs in over 200 schools nationwide. Grace's teaching methods had been documented, refined, and shared with thousands of educators who were transforming the lives of children who learned differently. Amelia, now 11 years old, was thriving in an advanced program where her creativity and intelligence were celebrated rather than constrained. She had become a youth advocate for educational reform, speaking at conferences about the importance of meeting children where they are rather than expecting them to conform to rigid standards. Destiny had been accepted into a prestigious middle school program for gifted students and was already expressing interest in following her mother's path into education. The two girls remained close friends, supporting each other's academic and personal growth while serving as examples of what children can achieve when they receive the right kind of support. Mr. Rodriguez had discovered that his greatest satisfaction came not from his business achievements, but from the knowledge that his investment in Grace's vision was creating opportunities for children across the country to discover their own potential. And Grace, now recognized as a national leader in alternative education methodologies, never forgot the lesson that had started it all: that every child deserves someone who believes in their ability to learn, grow, and succeed, regardless of how different their path might look from traditional expectations. The Foundation's motto, suggested by Amelia herself, was simple but profound: every child is smart. Some children just need different teachers.